All right, hey guys, this is video number 3. And this is chapter 5, section 3. And this is all about other trig functions. So the other trig functions. So we've talked about so far primarily sine, cosine, and tangent. And we know that sine is opposite over hypotenuse. And cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And tangent is opposite over adjacent. Well, there are 3 additional trig functions, and they are reciprocal functions. And remember that a reciprocal is a flipped over fraction. So I'm going to put these with their appropriate reciprocal functions. So the reciprocal of sine is cosecant. It's C-O-S-E-C-A-N-T, and its abbreviation is CSC. So cosecant of theta, and it's quite literally the reciprocal of sine. So it is hypotenuse over opposite. All right, which also means you could represent cosecant as 1 over sine, which also means you could represent sine as 1 over cosecant. So I just want to throw those out there so that you guys are familiar with that statement. Okay? And then likewise, the reciprocal of cosine is secant, S-E-C-A-N-T. Its abbreviation is SEC, so secant theta, and it is the reciprocal of cosine, so it's hypotenuse over adjacent. And if we can write it as hypotenuse over adjacent, then we can write it as 1 over cosine as well. So there's going to be an upcoming section where you're going to have to use some substitution a lot. Excuse me. And that substitution, if you see secant, you might want to put in 1 over cosine, or you might want to put in hypotenuse over adjacent, or, those kinds of things. So there's some different ways that you can utilize your substitution. So if secant is 1 over cosine, then cosine is 1 over secant as well. So keep in mind that those go both directions, 1 over the reciprocal of it. Okay, so tangent, its reciprocal is cotangent. Its abbreviation is COT, so cotangent of theta is the reciprocal of tangent, which is opposite over adjacent. So this is adjacent over opposite. And again, we can write this as 1 over tangent of theta, which means we can write tangent as 1 over cotangent of theta. Also remember, I don't really have room to throw this in here, but remember that tangent is also equal to sine over cosine, which means that cotangent is also equal to cosine over sine. Okay, so just multiple things for you to be aware of. Okay, so all that this section really is in terms of homework, there's going to be another video that introduces you to something else called trig identities, but there's no homework on that section yet. But the homework in here kind of just gets you familiar with this whole reciprocal idea. So make sure you have these all copied down, and then we'll continue your notes. I'm going to go to another slide. You can probably just continue on down your page. Remember that this is 5.3, and to be labeling the corners of your pages as you go. So here's how a problem might look. It will say something, if the sine of theta is 1/2, then label or name all 6 trig functions. Okay, so we can go right here and say we know that sine of theta is 1/2, which also means that its reciprocal would be 2, right? 2/1. And its reciprocal is cosecant is 2. And then we're going to have cosine. Its reciprocal, I'll just label them and then we'll fill these in, is secant. And then we have tangent. And its reciprocal is cotangent. So you can take a triangle. A lot of this is just taking information and labeling and filling some things in. So we don't even need to know what theta is. It doesn't matter. All that we need to know is if sine is opposite over hypotenuse, you take and throw theta in an angle. Doesn't matter. You pick it. Your opposite's going to be 1. Your hypotenuse is going to be 2. Now, you should know from the last section that this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. That makes this side the root of 3. But if you need the Pythagorean theorem to figure that out for you, you can go 1 squared plus x squared equals 2 squared and do that math and find out that that's the root of 3. Okay? And then you can find out what all of these ratios are, right? So cosine is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. So that's going to be rad 3/2. Tangent's going to be opposite over adjacent. Now, that's going to be 1 over radical 3. So make sure that you rationalize that by multiplying by the radical denominator, and you come out with rad 3/3. Do not leave this as your answer. That should not be accepted in varsity because it is not simplified. You cannot leave a radical in your denominator. So make sure you rationalize and you come out with that as your answer. And then you can take your sine, cosine, and tangent and just simply flip them. And you end up with your answers. Now, some you might have to fix. Cosine, for example, when you flip it for secant, you get 2 over radical 3. Well, again, there's some rationalization that has to take place. So rad 3, you get 2 rad 3/3. That's going to be your answer. Cotangent, if you flip this guy, you get rad 3/1, and that's just radical 3. Okay? So that's how those are going to work out for you. Okay. Then there are some things that I'm going to leave you to just see how good your problem solving skills are. They give you some where they say, here's sine, find cosine. Again, Pythagorean theorem. They tell you that if tangent is something, find cotangent, find the reciprocal. So I want to see how good your problem solving skills are. I also want to see you coming and asking some questions if you get concerned or you don't know what's happening. So this is where I'm going to kind of feel you guys out and get to know what your abilities are without me giving you specific examples on every single type of problem. So here's the next type that I do want to guide you through. It will say, here's the directions. Find tangent theta if cosine theta equals 21 over 25 and terminates in quadrant 4. Okay, well, what that means is that, so this part, this means your triangle is in quadrant 4. So you can draw yourself a triangle. And remember, your initial side is always on the x-axis. It terminates in quadrant 4, and you can drop your y side down that way. The angle theta is always in by the origin, I guess. And it can't ever be down by the y part. It has to be where your initial side is. So theta is going to be in there. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Adjacent would be the x side. Hypotenuse is going to be this side. And so it says to find tangent. Well, tangent is, I'm sorry, opposite over adjacent. I need a eraser. It is opposite over adjacent. So part of this is understanding what this part of the question means and how to draw the picture. And I highly, highly recommend you're drawing pictures when you do these. If you don't draw pictures, I don't know how you do these problems. But draw the picture, and then you're going to have to do some math using Pythagorean theorems. So when we do this, we're going to need to find this side in order to do this problem. So we're going to have 21 squared plus x squared equals 25 squared. And then 21 squared is 441 plus x squared equals 625. And when you guys do this work, don't just do this in a calculator. Show all this work on your paper so I can see what's happening when you turn it in. 625 minus 441 is 184. And then you need to take the root and take the root. So somewhere you should have the root of 184. Again, you're not turning this into a decimal. You're simplifying this thing. So rad 4 and rad 46. And the root of 4 is a 2. This will not simplify. So x is equal to 2 rad 46. So 2 rad 46. So the tangent of theta opposite is 2 rad 46 over 21. And if this was reducible, you would reduce. In this case, it's not. So this is the answer to that question. Oh, one more thing. I actually made a sign error and would miss this if I put this into varsity. Remember that this is going to be a positive direction. So this 21 is positive here. But this is a negative direction because you're going down, right? So this is actually going to be a negative sign value, and you're putting a negative over a positive. So this is actually going to be negative 2 rad 46 over 21. So this should be a negative value when you put your answer into varsity. And actually, let's talk about signs for a second. If you have the coordinate plane, there's this neat little mnemonic that is all students take calculus. And it's a farce. All students don't take calculus. But it's supposed to help you remember what trig functions are positive in which quadrants. So you start in the first quadrant, all students take calculus. And in the first trig, or in the first quadrant, all of your trig functions are positive. In the second one, it's sine and it's reciprocal. So sine and cosecant are positive. In the third quadrant, it's tangent and cotangent are positive. In the fourth quadrant, it's cosine and it's reciprocal, which is secant. So this is a good thing to toss in your notes. So these are the where or which trig functions, however you want to word this. So they all have two quadrants in which they're positive, right? If you want to know where sine is positive, they're all positive in quadrant 1, all of them. So sine is positive in 1 and 2. And remember, quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. So sine is positive in 1 and 2, cosine's positive in 1 and 4, tangent's positive in 1 and 3, and then you've got your reciprocal functions in there as well. So you should know if you're dealing with tangent, well, first off, let's go back to the problem. Cosine's positive, right? So that's either in quadrant 1 or quadrant 4, and they tell you it terminates in 4. So you should know right off the bat that your answer is going to be negative if you're looking for tangent. So really be very careful with your signs when you do these problems. That's where most of my students miss their points when they do these problems, is not missing signs. It's not the work, it's not the numbers, it's the actual signs, S-I-G-N-S, not S-I-N-E-S. So be careful with that. All right, one more problem in this video, and then you are off to do your problem set. So this one says, find secant of theta Find secant theta if cotangent theta equals negative 7 over 24 and cosine of theta is less than 0. So there's two things you need to notice here. One is that cosine is negative. So let's take a look at what we just talked about. Where is cosine negative? Oops, I'm trying to change my pen. Where is cosine negative? We said all students take calculus. So cosine is positive in 1 and 4. So cosine is negative in 2 and 3. Okay? And then, so that's where this part's true. Happens in quadrant 2 and quadrant 3. So we cannot be in 1 or 4 for this problem. Okay? Then this part says cotangent is negative. Well, that means tangent's negative, but tangent's positive in 3, so we have to be dealing with quadrant 2. So the second part removes that. So our answer is going to be in quadrant 2, and now we're dealing with secant, and if we're in quadrant 2, only sine is positive, so we know our answer is negative when we actually have it, okay? So let's find what we need. We'll draw a picture. That's always should be your first step. So I'm going to draw a picture. I know I'm in quadrant 2. And here's what I do. I don't like dealing with these reciprocal functions. So if cotangent of theta is that, then tangent of theta is 24 over 7. The signs just indicate location. So you can leave those off. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So opposite is 24, adjacent is 7. I might need to find that. I need secant. I start with cosine for me. This is how my brain thinks. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and I need secant. So the opposite or reciprocal. So I need hypotenuse over adjacent. So I do need to find x. So we're going to have to do Pythagorean theorem. This is what we're looking for. So I need 21 squared plus 7 squared equals x squared. 21 squared is, where did I get a 21 from? That's a 24. 24 squared is 576. 7 squared is 49. That comes out to 625. And that's a perfect square, which is really nice. So when we take the root of each of those, we have x equals 25. So that's a 25 up here. And now we can fill this in. Secant of theta, hypotenuse is 25 over adjacent, remember our theta is right there, is 7. And that's how you're going to get those answers. All right, so you're going to go do varsity 5.3. And then the next video is not going to have an assignment. It's just going to be a note video, I think. All right. Toodaloo, kids.